Hey, welcome back to this lesson of React tutorials. Here I'll be teaching you how to use the array.map method to render the elements in the React component, which is provided here, which is our simple to-do list app. Yeah, so what we've been given the to-do list component here, and you have a constructor with a super prop here. What you need to do is you have to initialize the state of the user input and the to-do list, and the user input has to be initialized as an empty string, and the to-do list has to be initialized as an empty array. Then next after that, in the render method, we need to remove the null value in the render method and kind of finish the code for the const items. Then after finishing the code of that, you have to use that value within curly braces inside the render method so as to implement it. So now, as you already know why we use the curly braces, that is in order to interpret the syntax as JavaScript, you need to use curly braces. I hope you remember that. So let's get started. We go to the constructor props, super props inside the constructor method and constructor function and initialize it. So constructor props, within that super props, and then how do you initialize this dot state? So this dot state equals, within the curly braces, we need to do the initial state of user input. So initial stage of user input. So mention user input, and then with the colon you write, what is that? An empty string. So you show it as an empty string here, then comma, then you write the code for the to-do list, the initial state. So that would be to-do list, and show it with the square brackets in order to depict it as an empty array. So the input is an empty string, and the to-do list obviously will be an object with a lot of items, so it will be shown as an empty array. Okay, then you have this handle submit method and all that, and the handle change, the handle submit, then the function, and then here you've already been provided with the items array, which is whereby splitting all the items by using this dot state dot input dot split. So that is splitting it by using the commas, so that when you're inputting the items with a comma, it will render that as individual items in a list form, in a list format. So that is already there. Then you have the button on click here, which will actually trigger this all the functions that you have done or the methods that you have done, and it will trigger it in order to show the user the whatever to-do list items you have rendered. Then in the render, come to the render and const items. Here to finish the code, you remove the null which is mentioned there and finish the code there. So what is actually the const items, you have to give it a value. So basically here is the place where you have to use that map method. Yeah, the map method you've already learned in JavaScript. So you have to utilize that method, and we show you how to utilize that and how to write that code for mapping. Yeah, here, and the reason for mapping it, so that because there will be a lot of items, right, in the to-do list, so you need to map it in order to render it as a list item. So this dot state dot the to-do list. Why? Because you are actually going to map the to-do list items. Const items is those items that is which is inside the to-do list, right? Simple. So this dot state dot to-do list dot map, as simple as that. And then inside the parenthesis you have to show that mapping method. So dot map I. Now I is just short for items. You can write, instead of I, it's just any item. So you can write X, A, B, whatever. That's just a symbolization of showing the items. Then I with an arrow. And then remember to write the list elements. List elements we've already learned in HTML, right? The open and close list element will actually list out items. That's the reason for doing the list item. Li indicated by open li and close li. So whenever you do listing of items in HTML, you always do the li, the open and close. That is the list, which shows a list. So open li then the closed li, the list tag which you call in HTML, and then come between that, and you have to show this I that you have mapped. You're mapping the I, which is all the items you're mapping, yeah, and then you're putting that in between the list elements. Why? So that it will be finally shown to the user as lists, separate items like a list format. And then when you are showing I after the mapping, you cannot just write it as I, but you have to write it within the curly braces. Right? Because as I mentioned earlier, in order to interpret the syntax as a JavaScript, you need to use the curly braces. So that's how it will interpret it. That is very common in React component. So then I write the I. So what happens is by doing this, it will interpret that JavaScript that we need to do, that is, and then it will basically do the mapping and show the result of the mapping as list items. So that's the idea of doing this code here. So this .state, .to-do list, .map, and the parenthesis, the I, which are the items. It could be XYZ, as I said, it could be anything, ABC, and arrow. Then within the li open and close tags, you have to mention the items or I, whatever you mean. If it is within map, if you use X, then within the curly braces, it has to be X. So whatever you're showing before the arrow, you have to write that here. Then only it will implement it or interpret the JavaScript. Yeah. And then return. Then you find all the rest of the code is already there. Let's see if anything is missing and if anything is wrong. Okay, you have the handle change, you have the handle submit, which will actually submit all the items, and then you have also a click button in the end. Okay, here there's a slight mistake in the typo in the initialization. So this dot state, by mistake I typed twice this dot state, sorry about that. So I need to remove one this from here and one dot from here, just debugging, haha. Okay, so let's do that correction here and preview. What else is wrong? Just go through it, and remember, after there are 3 more lessons in React. After that, I will be doing all the projects from here in the freeCodeCamp React certification. And in order to get the tutorials on time and the projects on time, do remember to smash that subscribe button and the bell button so that you are quickly notified of these projects and tutorials in React as and when I publish them. And I'm also doing side by side the JavaScript lessons, ES6. So you will get to be notified of both. So remember to smash that bell button, do not forget. And also to support my channel, do smash that like button and also share this with your friends who would find this useful. So here the const items array I've already explained, and already explained the above one, how you have to map it. And the button on click is already there. Now within the UL, if you find, I've written the items within the curly braces again, because items value we already mentioned in the const items, and then in order to interpret that, we just put it below as items within curly braces. So that's about it. So first you give a value as const, and then in order to interpret it, you write that within curly braces. That's always how the rendering is done. Yeah, rendering of elements. So let's see if anything else wrong here. Everything seems to be fine. And of course, later on, when I'm doing the projects with you, I will go through each and every step. Here it's just the finishing of the code. So when you're previewing it, you have to mention in the field whatever items like eat, code, rest, repeat, or whatever as mentioned in your question by FCC. So eat, comma, remember to put the comma, then only it will, according to the instruction, then only when you press the create list, it will trigger that list. Okay, eat, code, sleep, repeat. My to-do list is a H1 element that you've already written there. So see, when you do the create list, when you click it, so eat, code, sleep, repeat are given out as list items. So you're successful. That was the idea of mapping and rendering it, and also the initial state, how to do, you've learned that also. So these are the two things you've done, how to initialize and how to map in order to render the elements. So you've done both the things. Success. Okay, so let's do the run button. All the task is already done, no more to do. Yes, there you go.